Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Executive, a place where founders, investors, and operators share their life lessons and advice on how to make it at the highest level. I am excited to be joined by Dr. Marcelo Bigal today of Ventus Therapeutics. Ventus Therapeutics is an incredible biopharmaceutical company who notably raised, I think it was $140 million Series C last year from kind of the who's who of investors, including SoftBank and Andreessen Horowitz. Excited to dive into that. But uh, Dr. Marcelo Bigal, so good to have you here today.
Thank you very much. It's my greatest pleasure to be with you today, Matt.
Yes, great to have you. Why don't, if to start us off, I want to talk about a little bit about your career and how you got here as well. But maybe tell us a little bit about Ventus Therapeutics. What's the work that you're focused on, and really what's your team working on?
Ventus Therapeutics was formed in 2019. We have a great team, 82 full-time employees as we speak in 2 sites in Montreal and Canada. And what we try to do at Ventus is to develop small molecule medicines to proteins that are important and validated for diseases, but that can be very elusive to small molecule medicines. Uh, I would like to expand a little bit on what this
Please.
means. And along my career, I got to the sense that as we progressed in drug development, we were forced to do an undesirable trade. And what is this undesirable trade? The trade is that on one side, we know how to develop small molecules well. It's predictable. It's passed the test of time. We can scale easily, and it's affordable. But there was the sense, but on the other side, that all that could be drugged with small molecule had been drugged already. And now what remained to be drugged required different approaches, such as gene therapies, cell therapies, RNA therapies, RNA influence, and so far, which was the point that I made, an undesirable trade, because you are trading the reliability of small molecules, which, by the way, are accepted by the public. The public has no problem taking their vitamins, contraceptives, medications for hypertension. They're all small molecules. But see what happened during COVID epidemic when we said you need to take an mRNA vaccine. For very wrong reasons, the people got reluctant. So this is the trade that we try to address. And the way we address is many of the proteins that seem elusive to small molecules, they yet show a way to drug. They have a way to drug. It's just that actually we cannot see. The pocket is invisible to us. Small molecules require a pocket. So summarizing, at Ventus, we formed the company to try to address this undesirable trade, pursue great proteins with small molecules that we know how to do it and the public likes it and they can be affordable, and as so develop good medicines.
And you're going after neurological diseases. I think you're going after some cancer from this as well. What got you interested in that initially to attack these kind of things?
We go for immunological diseases primarily and neurological diseases. We're not pursuing cancer as the first line of action now. But what got me interested, I think I was born a scientist, Matt. At the age of 7, I wrote a letter to Santa Claus asking for a microscope, which I got.
Did you get it? Okay.
I got
Yeah.
it. I got it. A
Good.
very good one,
Yeah.
German.
Changed your
and,
life
and
probably.
Yeah, it changed my life. And I was in Brazil. So I wanted to be a scientist. I was curious. I nurtured this curiosity. And when I was in my late teen years, going now preparing to apply for college, my favorite uncle had an accident and became paraplegic. And the understanding at the time that basically there was nothing to help him, a man that was at the prime of his age, at the age of 40, uh, a husband, a father, that really shifted my scientific interest to neurology and to medicine. So I developed my career. So I became a neurologist, and I became in Brazil. I did my master's and PhD after my MD in neurosciences, and came to the United States to do my postdoctoral in 2001, and stayed. But as my curiosity evolved, it evolved. Why neurology? Obviously, it started with my uncle, But what caught my attention in neurology was horrible diseases that are rarely treatable. And then as I start moving to the science of the neuron, I start getting interested in other diseases that were not so neurological, not neurological in nature, like the immunological conditions, that also shared many of the aspects. There was, in my academic career, I got interested by diseases where there was a mismatch between insult and consequences. So think about a minor trauma and massive post-traumatic syndrome. I'm not talking about a big trauma. I'm talking about a minor trauma. Think about uh, short-term exposure to opioids and massive addiction to follow. Think about a migraine that starts benign and 3 years later the person has headaches that never end. So I got interested about that. And a lot of this, and this naturally drove my interest to immunology as well, for two reasons. Many of these neurological conditions that have the mismatch that I said, they have this mismatch because of immunological dysfunction. So is the innate immunity system overreacting to minor insults to the brain that's causing that? And two, this is true for immunology overall, not only for immunoneurology. So that's what my interest got really interested in. And it's a science that came to its prime because we know the targets, we have their structures, we know how to develop, and the diseases have profound unmet needs.
And where you're at today as a company with Ventus, having raised that 140 million last year, where's that going to? Where are you at as a company today, and where are you trying to apply that money?
Yeah, we raised a 290 million in total, including the 140 that you mentioned. Plus, we had a deal with Novo Nordisk, announced it recently, which raised another $70 million up front. So we are well funded to bring the programs to the clinic. So where are we as a company? Our we are we are getting into the clinic this year with our two leading assets. We have a pipeline of 5 targets, massive discovery breakthroughs, and two of them start in the clinic this year. One is an inhibitor of this protein called cGAS. cGAS is a very interesting story, Matt. cGAS is inside the cell, in the cytoplasm, sensing DNA. It senses DNA. For the non-scientists of your listeners,
Yeah,
DNA should not be there. DNA
interesting.
is not supposed to be in the cytoplasm of the cell. If it's there, it's leaking from other parts of the cell or coming from outside, like in a viral infection. So when cGAS senses DNA, cGAS is activated and causes the release of another substance called the interferon, an, is an interferonopathy that ends causing a lot of cellular damage. It's a self-sacrifice. It's a way of containing an insult. But the problem is, very often, the insult is not so robust. It's the mismatch that I mentioned. And cGAS becomes overactive and will cause diseases such as lupus, systemic sclerosis, dermatomyositis, bad diseases, ALS, Parkinson's disease in the brain.
Mm.
The cGAS is a highly after sought target, but nobody could drug it. To the first point that I said, it has been undruggable so far. Many companies try it, none of them advance it to the clinic. Several companies are still trying. They fail to advance to the clinic. But because of our technology, we were able to drug cGAS. We were able to find the pocket, develop small molecules, advance them, conducted toxicology studies, demonstrated it's safe, and we're advancing to the clinic in a massive accomplishment of our team for lupus, systemic sclerosis, and dermatomyositis. The second compound that gets to the clinic this year is an inhibitor of another protein that is inside the cell called NLRP3. It's another sensor of danger. In common, cGAS and NLRP3 sense danger. And NLRP3 will sense other sorts of danger, such as accumulation of amyloid protein, tau protein, synuclein, crystals, pH changes in the cell. So we developed very novel chemical matter with a series that did not penetrate the brain and a series that penetrated the brain. we licensed the non-brain penetrant series to Novo Nordisk. And they are developing these medications for cardiometabolic diseases that Novo has deep and extraordinary expertise. And we retain the brain penetrant series plus systemic for other indications, like such as OA and asthma. But we are hitting the clinic with the brain penetrant series with the intent of treating Parkinson's disease and the most refractory forms of epilepsy. In common, inflammation is exuberant in these areas driven by an overactive NLRP3 path. So it's a very good moment to the clinic. We are the science, as I hope I conveyed,
Yeah.
is understood. The targets were difficult. We drug with small molecules, so it's all within the scope of the company.
I want to ask because you've done obviously a really good job of raising a lot of capital to advance the company and get these drugs in the clinic. What do you think was key in raising capital for you? What do you think led to being able to raise so much capital in a world where you really have to advance?
I think a few. So meaning, I think your question has distinctions when we talk about the early fundraisers and the
Right.
late fundraisers. So in terms of the early fundraise, there was profound conviction on our lead investors, Versant Ventures, that this thesis that I applied to you is a good thesis.
Mm-hmm.
It was a company worth forming. But I think that actually the key, but the point here, Matt, as I like to say to my team, I never saw a startup dying or not launching because of lack of ideas. Never saw.
Yeah.
Okay,
Ideas are
so the
cheap. Ideas are cheap, right? There's an
ideas
end
are
doesn't.
cheap, ideas are
Yeah.
plenty, ideas, and founders are smart. They're
Right.
Nobel Prize people. They are academic founders. Founders are smart. So ideas are there. I think the fundamental point that allowed us to have the early convincing to raise the Series A from and to bring Google Ventures to the mix was that we knew how to execute. Behind any good idea, there are a series of complexities in manufacturing, executing, thinking the plan, putting the strategy in place, hiring properly, not subscribing to the hype, and bringing something real. And I think that actually we're successful in demonstrating this from the early days. We had unique scientific angles and a willingness to develop pragmatically. Then what we did is exactly that. We used our money well, and we were able, when it came to the B, where the time of the B, which we raised at $100 million led by RA Capital, the story was easy to demonstrate in the regard that actually I said, look how much we achieved since the A.
Right.
And when we came to the C, I said, this is what we had at the B. This is what, look how much we achieved. And by the way, at the time of the C, we achieved this much without even starting spending the proceeds of the B. I have my entire B here. And look how much we achieved. So to me, it has always been stay away from the jargon and the hype and just show what you did.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think let the results speak on behalf of your company.
And you, as the CEO, during this time, what you obviously, you were focused on some fundraising, but interesting to note that it seems like you were really focused on making sure the team executed. Where's your focus now as the CEO? What are your priorities? What do you need to focus on?
So we have several priorities, right? And I think that actually I like to say that the definition of a CEO is the ability to do something that you never did before and your training didn't help. Right? So
I like that. Yeah.
So which means you have to be able to read the environment,
Right.
read the situation. I like to say we live in an ecosystem, and it doesn't matter. We can't deviate from what the changes the ecosystem is having. So part A is I think, and I'm going to tell concretely what I mean about that. And then the second part is it's not enough that actually you have a good read of the ecosystem. You need to build alignment from those who invest your vision, and your leadership team, and the company at large. And this requires sometimes changing how you do things. And you then need to be able to execute. It's execution, execution, execution. So if you think from the most pragmatic way, we develop good medicines using small molecules. The strategy didn't change, but many things change it. And we target the targets that we wanted to do, and we succeeded. Discovery was very successful. The technology that allowed this flourished, and now is scale. We scaled it. But meanwhile, since, for example, we raised the C, there have been enormous headwinds in the biotech index, right? Meaning
Yeah.
60% down from its peak,
Right.
which means people are nervous, people are losing money. And on the top of this, there has been the recent bank crisis, which added insult to injury. So the most fundamental change is the external environment change it. Great thing we are well funded. Great thing that we acknowledge reality in the eye. The second thing is what brought us from the A to C was an incredible evolution on discovery breakthroughs. Now we are transitioning to the clinic. What will continue to make us successful is transition to the clinic well, still on time, still on money, right? Still on budget,
Yeah.
and demonstrate that actually we can do both the discovery and the development well. So I think that to your question, and we can. I mean, as my past career, in the past I have been 3 times chief medical officer. I have a chief medical officer that was a therapeutic area head at Merck. So the team is fully formed, but the philosophical understanding that you are moving from early stage to late stage requires operational changes and a different magnitude of resource implication. So I think this is what I sometimes like to say, that if you expect me to say revolutionary things, you probably are going to be frustrated, because I strongly subscribe and believe that the most revolutionary things that we can do as CEOs in the area that we are, right? Obviously, there are pure technology, the visionaries but in the area where we are, where it's highly regulated, the patient will use your product, and if you develop it poorly, you're going to cause harm. So in our area, the most revolutionary thought is do the basic very, very well.
Hmm.
And that's what we try to do. So that's the shift that we're doing in our company.
It's the simplicity of doing the small things really, really well.
Simplicity, clarity. Remember that our output is not a publication in a medical journal. Our
Right.
output is a medication that somebody's going to use, right?
Yeah.
And focus to the extreme.
Yeah. What a good way to say that. I'm curious because you said your thesis in the beginning with the team, when you're starting out. Has your thesis changed? Has your thesis been correct so far, or have you had to adapt it?
The thesis that we can drug incredible targets using a small molecule, I think, is more validated than ever.
Yeah.
The target that we are pursuing, that I thought for systemic sclerosis, dermatomyositis, lupus, had been totally undruggable so far.
Yeah.
And we found a way to drug with small molecules. So let me tell you why, so people don't believe that actually this is something. The technique is very simple. When protein, very sophisticated, pure quantum physics, but the principle is very simple. And the principle goes like this: proteins are inside the cell. They are in a media that has water and salt, like the ocean, right? That's what the cell is. And the forces that govern water and salt are stronger than the forces that govern the protein per se. So the protein is at any given moment being squished and squeezed by water, right? So the
Right.
protein assumes the protein is dancing, is a ballet dance. The protein is dancing, and or for those that like video games, is a Pac-Man. The protein is opening its mouth, closing its mouth, rotating, turning upside down. But when we do traditional drug development, we grow crystals of the molecule, and crystals are static. You're only seeing one snapshot of the dance. And if that snapshot doesn't show you a pocket, proteins need small molecules need a pocket to bind. If you don't see a pocket in that snapshot, you then start doing drug development in the dark, trial and error. Okay, well, you try to inhibit what you believe that protein causes. What we develop is two disruptive technologies. First, we can sample the dance using an algorithm called the order ring cluster. We sample how many conformations a protein assumes. Sometimes it's 18, sometimes it's 42. Then we see if any of the conformations have a pocket. And if the conformation has a pocket, we then use a second part of the technology. The pocket is filled by water, but the water is moving, right? And so the water has a molecular dynamic. We define the molecular dynamic of water. We call this a hydrocophore. And once we define this hydrocophore, we basically, the jump is, if water with these attributes bind there, chemical matter with the same attributes will bind as well. So we use the energy of water as a blueprint to develop the chemical matter that we believe will bind, and that we test. So a lot of our discovery developments, I told you about the late stage development. Yeah. A lot of our discovery developments now that we demonstrated that the thesis is right, the discovery development focus on proteins that are currently drugged by antibodies. So there are treatment for the diseases, but they are antibodies like anifrolumab, other antibodies, because they cost a lot. They are not well accepted by patients, and they have liabilities of their own. And what we're trying to do is now create the first generation of small molecules for for targets that have been validated by the antibodies. So the thesis stands.
It's remarkable. I know a lot of, as companies develop, sometimes you start with a thesis and it's proved quickly wrong, so you have to adapt quickly. So it's interesting to see that yours is still very much intact.
Nothing wrong with that. I think that actually a capital mistake is to pursue a dead end.
Right.
Right? Nothing wrong with that. But in our case, the thesis stands right.
What I'm also interested in is, I've had the fortune of, meeting and interviewing, quite a few biopharmaceutical CEOs where different backgrounds, right? Some came from science, some were investment banking, we were CFOs and then turned into CEOs. Some were even from an attorney background, right? You're coming from the more of a scientific background. Has it been just interesting for you to be a CEO and have that more business mindset? How have you had to adapt yourself to be the leader?
That's a very good question. I think there is no right and wrong about what's the profile of a CEO in a biotech company, as long as we understand what we don't know,
yeah,
and we surround ourselves with pieces. I don't have an MBA. Right? In the early days, I didn't know how to build a cap table. Right.
right.
And so basically, you understand what you don't know, and you be humble, and you just staff yourself properly. But then you understand what you know, and don't ever forget that. In my case, is a profound respect for the pain and disability that people endure. So that is my secret sauce. That's the thing so the clinical development plans that we do, they're unique. They are respectful to patients. They try to measure things that people didn't do before, because in everything that we do, we are doing something that actually understands that the user, the recipient, the customer, if you may, is somebody that has pain and fear and suffering. Yeah. So when you put that way, when you understand what I'm a good clinical developer, I have experience in R&D, I don't have experience in finances, I don't have experience in business development. You surround yourself from the early days to be complementary, and then what happens is we learn.
Yeah.
Right? We learn. I was always very entrepreneurial, just by the fact that actually I wanted to think from the lens of the patient. From my early days as a clinical developer, I had to convince my bosses that it was okay to do a clinical trial that was different than they ever had, to use a different endpoint, that I wanted to go to a different disease than they were thinking. So in that regard, I was a mini CEO when I was trying to advance programs innovatively. And so I think that's my answer to you. So it's
I love that.
basically, and it never changes.
Right.
At any given moment, I know my what I do well, and I know what I don't do well, and then
Yeah,
don't pretend.
don't pretend. You surround yourself with great people, and then you keep the customer in mind. I love that. Um, Another interesting thing to note, I think about being well rounded is I think you're also a venture partner at Versant, right? And so you're also an investor. Does that make you a better CEO, a better scientist? You know, why also be an investor when you already have so much on your plate?
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm not an investor on the strict sense, since I don't have participation on the funds of Versant or anything like that. Um, I When I joined Ventus, the enterprise was at a very high risk. I mean, pre-Series A, pre-seeding. We didn't
Yeah.
even have the seeding money. And I was invited, and actually the thesis of the company in the beginning was different. I eventually changed the thesis before getting the funded. So I was invited to be the CEO because Versant had an understanding that I had experience, and my pragmatic approach would be nurturing to a company that had to be put together under a lot of uncertainty. But it was risky to me as well. What if this doesn't work? I have a very good job. I am now going to do this, and if this doesn't work, I don't have a job. So that's how I became a venture partner. The venture partner was the way that Versant offered me to reassure me that if Ventus didn't work in the beginning, other opportunities would come, while bringing to Versant the value to their investment team that of somebody like me, late stage development,
Right.
neurology, a small molecule. So basically, it was a very synergistic approach. Does it make me a better CEO? It does, actually, and it makes me a better CEO because it gives me a privileged seat in a room full of VCs, so I better understand how they think, how
Right.
they make decisions. I understand their fears and their passions, and this is not different from a VC company to another. Obviously, Versant is a very well structured one, so it operates very well. But I think that actually, since I like to observe well, meaning and to understand behavior, this privileged seat in the room makes me better capable of understanding the external environment.
Yeah, and I'm sure for fundraising it was incredibly helpful. You knew the objections already that you could answer to. Um, a couple last questions as we start to wrap up. You're in terms of different experiences. You're also on the board of I think it's Coda. Is it Coda Biotherapeutics?
Coda is a biotherapeutic company that was also funded by Versant Ventures. So I am an independent director at Coda.
Independent director. Okay, and
Yeah.
so your role as independent director, how do you see that role? You know, is that something that also again for you is really valuable because it kind of expands your I don't know, your just experience in those type of positions.
It's really valuable because as you can quickly we can quickly grasp, boards and management teams, they mostly aligned, but somewhat misaligned.
Hmm.
Always. And I talk about very functional boards. If the board is dysfunctional, we're not aligned.
Right.
But in very functional boards like I have at Ventus, there's a 90% alignment, 10% misalignment. For example, I may want to IPO, they may not, or vice versa. I may want to develop another program. They may think that conserving cash is better, like healthy misalignment. Plus,
Healthy debate.
I represent the shareholders, and they have a dual representation. They represent the shareholders plus their limited partners and their investment team. So the misalignment is inherent. Good independence, help with that. So a good independent, the main lesson. So as an independent at Coda, I am a partner to the CEO, and I have an obligation to try to see from his lenses. But I'm also a partner to the board at large. I'm an independent voice.
You're trying to create
So
alignment when there's a lack of alignment.
create alignment
Yeah.
or side up with sometimes the CEO when there's some fear in the room, or basically say, as a CEO, I see where he's coming, and I see the point. So it helps a lot. Or come to the CEO and say, I think that actually you're misreading. I think that actually reducing costs is in the order of the day. Look what's happening. So it helped me to understand better the role of an independent, which means it helped me to select extraordinary independence, covering pieces that, for example, my first independent is a CEO and was my boss, which means some people would be afraid of this kind of
Right.
relationship, right? But
And you valued
and
it.
was my boss in the past. Why? Because I understood, and he comes from business, and I don't. So I understood that actually I trust him. He has my well-being center stage. He likes me, and he has an experience that I don't have. Our second independent, Jane Henderson, we hired to be the chair of the auditing committee, multiple times CFO. I don't understand the auditing piece so well. And the third CFO, the third independent, is a multiple times chief medical to be a sounding board,
Yeah.
right? So I think that actually, uh, if you assume good intent and you try to learn the dynamics, every opportunity, like being a venture partner, being an independent board director, is a opportunity to learn and
Yeah.
to execute on that.
Yeah. What I can tell is from you, Marcelo, and I think you said this, you said this earlier in the interview, is like you're really good at putting the right people around you, right? Where you think there's, maybe a gap or something, or where you need extra support or a sounding board, right? In the chief medical officer. I love that you just go and put those people around you. I think it's easy as a leader to, and be want to put people who are maybe not as smart as you, so you always feel like you're the smartest, but obviously that is not the way to run a company.
That's
Um,
absolutely not the way to run the company, right? So one thing that I would like to mention, if I can,
please.
since 2019 when we were formed, and in the beginning I said there was churn, right? Meaning, do we have money? Can we pay the salaries? I inherited a group of 18 people to begin with that with lots of uncertainty. We started our company in 1st of May of 2019. Our attrition rate is 3%. We neglectable. People that join the company, they don't leave.
Yeah.
And they don't leave because I think that actually is part of our culture. I always like to say, bring joy to the workplace. Look our profession. We're going to spend the day working very hard, but interacting with great people internally, interacting with the best scientists in the world externally. We're going to learn. If we do our job well, people will benefit, and we are paid. Bring joy to the workplace.
Yeah.
What we do is really joyful. And then basically, the highest talent is always hired. They are paid above the 50% benchmark. Right? And then I never treated my employees as average.
Yeah.
They're hired because they're really
Above
good.
average.
They
Yeah.
are rewarded as so, and they have the sense of principle. You have to do this with your employees. You have to do this with your board. You have to do this with your non-board investors, because at the very end, despite the with your consultants, despite the difference in perspectives, we all want to develop medications.
Right. You're aligned on the
So that's the
mission.
common ground.
Yeah. As we wrap up, is there a book that you think back to in your career that you read and like really helped you that you would share?
Most of many. I am an avid reader, and
I'm shocked.
in my LinkedIn account, very often I put lists of books that I read and recommend to others. Most of the books that influence me are fiction, and but I'm going to mention to you something more concrete to what you said. But for example, a book that profoundly influenced me, and I keep rereading, it's called *The Fall* from Albert Camus.
Okay.
And the reason is, meaning, is a monologue of somebody that happens over multiple days in between a judge and a reader, and the reader is you, a listener. The listener is you. They are in a bar, so you are in the bar with this judge. that
Yeah.
never stop talking. And he falls. He falls from what he perceives himself as being the most virtuous and the present of God to humanity, the gift of God to humanity.
Yeah.
As the conversation goes, you realize how flawed and human he is. So it's an exercise of don't forget you are human, keep humble, and don't think more of yourself than you really are. But now from the business perspective, but that's for my style, right? That's what I like. There are two books that I read more recently that are among the most important books that I read from business perspective. One is called Deep Work. They're related. One is called Deep Work from Carl Newport, and one's called Stolen Focus. I
Hmm.
forgot the name of the author of Stolen Focus. And the fundamental thing is a book that I gave to my daughters, I gave to my relatives, and to plenty of my employees. It's a book about how distracted we became, how incapable of multitasking in reality we are and have always been, and the relevance of really and how the social media and technologies helped us to become substantially more distracted with the feeling that we work more but produce less, and the importance of identifying the things that actually you are better capable of doing than anybody else, and deep work on that. In the case of a CEO, the strategy, the alignment, the culture, the hiring, right? These are things that CEO shouldn't delegate.
Yeah.
While everything else is, meaning the scientific development, I have the best CSO that industry could have. The medical development, I have an extraordinary CMO. Right? The business development, my CFO and COOs are state of the art, and their teams are. So all of these, I could do it, but I couldn't do better than they do.
Yeah.
So focus on the things that actually you can do that actually belongs to you. I think that actually these two books speak to that, Matt.
Well, I also love what you said about feeling like you should do more work, yet it produces less, right? And I think that has been a problem for us as a culture is we just do more and more and more, but are we actually producing more? A lot of times, probably not if we're multitasking. So it's interesting to note that.
As a neuroscientist, I tell you, our brain is incapable of multitasking. Incapable, right?
Right.
If you are in the jungle and a lion in the prehistorical times, and a lion comes to hunt you, you don't take a selfie as you are trying to escape.
Right.
Okay, and you
Yeah.
don't think about what you're going to do tomorrow as you try to escape. Our
Right.
our
So
brain is wired to be focused and
yeah.
not multitask, and yet we take pride in saying, I'm a multitasker. I can do
Yeah.
10 things at a time. No, you cannot. You do 10
Right.
things. It requires substantial more effort and substantial more time than what you're capable of doing.
Yeah. This is coming from someone who knows the brain. So I love hearing
Right?
that. Um, you shared a lot of good advice, but is there one, piece of advice you'd love to kind of leave us with today, coming from a CEO perspective?
I think that actually coming from a CEO perspective, let me try to get with an advice that is not so restricted to the pharma
Yeah.
development. The means do not justify the ends,
Mm.
right? So the ends are the main goal. In my case, I want to develop good medicines as I did in the past, for diseases that matter. I want to do that. That's the end. I am very hopeful that that we will succeed, and and we are stacking the cards to increase our POS. But I may not succeed because it continues to be a risk environment. The thesis may fail. And this is true for everybody, right? I mean, if you're developing a new car, if you're developing a new airplane, if you're developing eco friendly um, initiatives, the prize is obvious. And obviously, if you get the prize, you are going to be rewarded, but you may fail, which comes to my point. Make how you try to achieve the prize count,
Hmm.
generate good jobs, hire people, treat people with dignity, right? Generate good ideas. train, develop talent, get prize in seeing your talent becoming important in other things in life. So basically, I can't guarantee 100% that the thesis of what we do as CEOs will pan out. But I will not consider myself a failure if it doesn't, right? Because from the get-go, there is joy on the day by day of our business. And I think this is the best advice that I give to people.
That's a good point. For a lot of companies that still end up maybe not succeeding, if they were to create great jobs, joy through the day, people learned a lot, maybe it wouldn't be a total failure, right?
Don't bully people. Don't create disagreements. Don't create tension that is unnecessary. Create good tension, not the unnecessary tension. And just remember that our time in this world is finite.
Yeah,
Make good use of it.
right. That's exactly right. That's a great way to end us. Marcelo, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Very excited. I will say, I think you're definitely on the right track, and I don't see really Ventus, failing with all the good work you've already put in place. But excited to see things unfold, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm sure we will succeed. And thank you so very much, Matt. It was a pleasure to have this discussion.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Marcelo. Take care.